Emma's phone buzzed insistently on the counter, vibrating against the stack of unpaid bills and the ever-growing pile of recipe notebooks. She had just finished a long shift at the small cafe where she worked, her hands still tingling from the heat of the oven and the relentless chopping of vegetables. Between balancing work, bills, and the occasional freelance catering gig, she barely had time to dream, and yet, somehow, she had never stopped dreaming. One day, she told herself, she would run her own kitchen, create menus that told stories, and cook meals that people would remember long after they left the table. The call she received that evening was unexpected. The voice on the other end was polite, almost formal. "Hello, is this Emma Carter?" It asked. "I'm calling about the chef position you applied for. Are you available to discuss it?" Emma blinked, her mind racing. She hadn't applied for a standard chef position in years. Most of her applications were for catering or small private events. Yes, I'm available," she stammered, grabbing a notepad and pen as if preparing for a serious interview. A few minutes later, the details began to unravel. The caller introduced herself as Mrs. Harding, an assistant for David Wentworth, a wealthy single father who owned a tech company downtown. He was looking for someone to cook full-time for his household, not just meals, but a lifestyle, meal planning, grocery shopping, and managing the kitchen. Emma listened in stunned silence. A full-time private chef? For a family? It sounded like a dream job, yet the weight of the responsibility pressed against her chest. She had never worked in a household like this before. "You'd be cooking for Mr. Wentworth and his daughter," the assistant explained. "They have specific dietary preferences, and we're looking for someone who can adapt to a busy schedule. Mr. Wentworth is very particular about quality." Emma's thoughts swirled. A wealthy household meant stability, yes, but also pressure, scrutiny, and expectations unlike anything she had faced in her cafe life. Still, she couldn't deny the excitement bubbling in her chest. She scribbled down the appointment for the interview, promising herself she would go, even if only to see if this opportunity was as real as it sounded. That evening, Emma sat at her tiny kitchen table, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Her hands, calloused from years of chopping, kneading, and stirring, twitched at the thought of working in a kitchen of her own, even if it wasn't hers entirely. She imagined gleaming countertops, professional-grade stoves, and the smell of spices and fresh herbs filling every corner of the house. Yet she also imagined the unknown, a child she had never met, a father who might be stern or distant, and a household that had its own rhythm she would need to learn and respect. Still, there was something magnetic about the offer. For the first time in years, she felt seen not just as a cook, but as someone capable of creating something meaningful for a family. She recalled the countless meals she had prepared for friends who always said her cooking felt like home, like warmth on a plate. Could she bring that same feeling to a stranger's home? The next morning, Emma arrived at the Wentworth residence, a sprawling house tucked behind manicured hedges and towering oak trees. Her heart thumped in her chest as she rang the bell, the weight of anticipation pressing down on her. A young woman opened the door, her expression polite but curious. "Emma?" she asked. "Yes," Emma replied, smoothing her apron nervously. "Mr. Wentworth will see you in the kitchen," the assistant said, leading her inside. Emma's eyes widened at the immaculate layout, stainless steel counters, hanging pots, and the faint aroma of herbs that suggested someone else had been preparing meals just moments before. David Wentworth was waiting, tall and imposing, yet there was a softness in his eyes that contrasted with his professional demeanor. He shook her hand firmly. "Emma, thank you for coming. I've read your resume. I think your experience and creativity could be just what we need." Emma smiled, a little unsure but encouraged. She had expected a job, yes, but she had never anticipated the quiet tension in the room, the subtle warmth beneath the surface, and the hint of challenge in David's measured words. She nodded, trying to exude confidence. "I hope I can meet your expectations," she said. David's gaze softened, but he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to the kitchen. "Why don't you prepare something small for us? Something that tells me who you are as a cook." Emma swallowed hard, feeling a flutter of nerves and excitement. She had no idea that stepping into this kitchen would be the first step in a journey far beyond anything she had imagined, not just in her career, but in her life. Little did she know, it wasn't just her cooking skills that would be tested in the weeks ahead, but her heart as well. The first morning in the Wentworth household began with a pthemeth of fat as well. The first morning in the Wentworth household began with a Benmoon, quiet tension that Emma couldn't quite place. She had arrived early, hoping to familiarize herself with the kitchen, and immediately noticed the subtle hum of a home in motion-soft footsteps above her, a faint creak of floorboards, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee lingering in the air. Everything seemed immaculate, almost too perfect, and it made her feel slightly out of place. David appeared first, impeccably dressed even in the early hours, his posture straight and eyes alert. He greeted her with a professional smile, but it lacked the warmth she had expected after the previous day's interview. "Emma," he said, "I'm glad you're here. Let's start with breakfast. Simple, but nutritious. Pancakes, eggs, and some fresh fruit. Nothing fancy." Emma nodded, trying to hide her nerves as she set to work. The kitchen seemed larger than any she had worked in before, the countertops gleaming under the morning light. She moved with practiced precision, chopping, whisking, and flipping with care. Despite the grandeur around her, she felt strangely comforted by the familiar rhythm of cooking. It was like a language she had known all her life. And then she heard the soft voice of a child. "Who are you?" Emma froze for a moment, spoon hovering over a sizzling pan. She turned to see a little girl peeking from behind the doorway, no more than 7 or 8, with wide, curious eyes and a cautious stance. Her hair was a tangle of soft curls, and she held a small stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest. "I'm Emma," she said gently, kneeling slightly to appear less intimidating. "I'm going to be cooking for you and your dad." The girl didn't move closer, just tilted her head and studied Emma with the intensity of someone assessing a stranger. "I'm Lily," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't usually like people." Emma smiled, keeping her tone soft. "That's okay. I don't expect you to like me right away. I just want to make meals that you'll enjoy." Lily's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, Emma feared she had said the wrong thing. Then, almost imperceptibly, Lily stepped a little closer, curious despite herself. Emma felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the wall the child had built around herself wasn't unbreakable. David watched from the counter, arms crossed, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "She's cautious," he said, almost apologetically. "Her mother. She's careful about letting anyone in. You'll need to be patient." Emma nodded, stirring the batter for the pancakes. "I understand. I'll take it slow." For the next hour, Emma worked in tandem with the household rhythms. She set the table, plated the food, and even offered Lily a small taste of the pancake batter, which the girl cautiously accepted. There was a brief, quiet moment when Lily's lips curved into a tiny, hesitant smile, and Emma felt her heart lift. That single smile was more rewarding than any compliment she had received in her professional life. After breakfast, as David left for work, he paused in the doorway. "I'll be back around 6. Feel free to explore the kitchen and get familiar with everything. And be patient with her." Alone, Emma and Lily lingered in the kitchen. The child's curiosity began to surface, little questions about ingredients, cooking techniques, and flavors. Emma answered patiently, showing her how to crack an egg without breaking the yolk and letting her stir the batter gently. They shared small laughs, and for a fleeting moment, the kitchen felt less like someone else's home and more like a space of connection and possibility. By the end of the morning, Emma realized that this job was unlike any she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about cooking, it was about entering a household, a life, a family, and finding a way to belong without forcing herself in. She glanced at Lily, who was now engrossed in shaping a pancake into the form of a heart, and felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The child hadn't said it yet, but Emma sensed the start of something deeper, a bond that would test her patience, challenge her heart, and ultimately change the course of her life in ways she could never have predicted. Over the next few days, Emma began to settle into a rhythm with the Wentworth household, but it was Lily who became the real focus of her attention. The little girl remained cautious, watching Emma from a distance at first, her eyes a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Emma knew that trust, especially for a child like Lily, had to be earned, and she approached each interaction with patience and care. It started small, offering Lily a taste of a sauce, letting her sprinkle a pinch of cinnamon into the morning oatmeal, or handing her a small whisk to help stir a batter. Emma could feel Lily's walls beginning to crack, just slightly, each time the girl's tiny hands mirrored her own movements in the kitchen. And when Lily laughed, even at something as trivial as a pancake flipping awkwardly in the pan, Emma felt a warmth that went beyond professional satisfaction. It was pure, unguarded joy. One afternoon, Emma suggested they try baking cookies together. "You can decorate them any way you like," she said, placing a tray of sugar cookies on the counter. Lily's eyes lit up and she practically bounced in place. She chose purple and blue icing, carefully outlining shapes and occasionally sneaking a lick of frosting when Emma wasn't looking. "You're a natural," Emma said, laughing as Lily proudly held up a cookie shaped like a star. "I think these might be the best cookies I've ever seen," Lily beamed, her small chest puffed out with pride. "I want to make them for Dad," she said softly. "He works a lot, and I want him to have something nice when he comes home." Emma felt a pang in her heart. This wasn't just about cooking. It was about love, care, and connection. She realized that, for Lily, the kitchen had become a safe space, a place where she could express herself without fear, even if just for a little while. Emma knew then that her role went beyond chef. She was becoming a source of comfort, a quiet presence that Lily could rely on in ways that extended far past food. David, meanwhile, noticed the shift in his daughter's demeanor. He came home one evening to find Lily perched on a stool, carefully whisking egg whites into a meringue under Emma's guidance. The sight made him pause in the doorway. Emma looked up and smiled, nodding politely. "She's learning quickly," she said, her voice warm. David chuckled softly. "I can see that. She's usually a bit reserved," Emma shrugged. "She's learning to trust, I think." Slowly, but surely. That evening, after dinner, Lily curled up on the couch with a small notebook, sketching shapes and scribbling little notes about the day's cooking adventures. Emma watched from the kitchen, wiping down counters, and felt a mixture of pride and affection. She had come here to cook meals, but the true reward was watching this little girl open her heart. The bond wasn't immediate, and there were still moments of hesitation. Lily would retreat to her room when things got overwhelming, and Emma learned to respect those boundaries, leaving little notes in the kitchen or small treats for her to discover. It became a silent language of care between them, Emma's way of saying, "I'm here, but I won't push." By the end of the week, Emma realized that something profound was happening. Cooking had started as a job, a professional endeavor, but it had blossomed into something far more personal. Each meal, each shared recipe, each small laugh in the kitchen was stitching together a fragile, growing trust. And as Lily looked up at her one evening, eyes wide with a mix of mischief and admiration. Emma felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest, a sense that this little girl had chosen her, in a way that was deeper than either of them fully understood, yet it was then Emma realized that she wasn't just the cook in this household. She was becoming a part of it, slowly but surely, one recipe, one laugh, and one shared moment at a time. And though she didn't yet know the full extent of the journey ahead, she felt ready to nurture, to care, and maybe, just maybe, to love in a way she hadn't expected. Not every day in the Wentworth household was as easy or heartwarming as the morning spent cooking with Lily. Emma quickly realized that beneath the surface of laughter and baking lessons, tension lingered like a shadow that refused to dissipate. The first real challenge came unexpectedly. David's ex-wife Karen dropped by one afternoon. She was impeccably dressed, her smile polite but thin, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Emma had only met her briefly during the interview process, but the energy in the room shifted instantly. Lily, who had been happily decorating cookies with Emma, froze mid-sprinkle and clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly. "Hi, honey," Karen said sweetly, reaching out to hug her daughter. Lily hesitated, then retreated toward Emma, who instinctively offered her hand for comfort. "What are you doing?" Karen asked, her tone neutral but probing. Emma's heart thumped. She had been warned that these visits could be complicated, but nothing could have prepared her for the subtle tension radiating from Karen. She forced a polite smile and said, "We're baking cookies, just for fun." Lily's decorating them herself. Karen's eyes flicked toward Emma, and there was a brief, unreadable pause. Then she smiled faintly. "That's lovely," she said before turning to Lily. "I'll just be upstairs for a moment." As soon as Karen left, Lily buried her face in Emma's shoulder, muttering, "I don't like her visits. She makes everything scary." Emma stroked her hair gently. "I know, sweetie, but I'm here with you, okay?" These visits, Emma realized, were just one layer of the complexities she would have to navigate. Lily's emotions were raw and sometimes unpredictable. There were days when she would be sweet and curious, asking endless questions about ingredients and flavors, and other days when she would snap at Emma for no apparent reason, retreating to her room and shutting the door. Emma learned to respect these moods, never forcing interactions, but quietly leaving little notes or treats for Lily to discover. Then there was the leaving little notes or treats for Lily to discover. Challenge of meeting David's high expectations. While he was warm and polite most of the time, he could be exacting when it came to his meals. He had specific dietary needs, a preference for certain brands, and a meticulous schedule. Emma had to adapt quickly, learning not just recipes but routines, shopping lists, and his subtle cues about flavors and timing. A single misstep, a slightly overcooked steak, or a missing ingredient was met with a polite but pointed remark. "Next time, try adjusting the heat just a little," he would say, his eyes sharp but not unkind. Even so, the real test wasn't the cooking itself, it was the balancing act between professional duties and emotional presence. Emma found herself constantly assessing how to connect with Lily without overstepping, how to please David without losing herself, and how to navigate the invisible tension lingering in the house. She often went to bed exhausted, mentally replaying the day, wondering if she had done enough, if she had handled every situation with the care it deserved. One evening, after a particularly tense afternoon when Lily had refused to eat dinner, Emma sat quietly at the kitchen table. David entered, his expression weary. "She's been having a rough day," he said softly, more to himself than to her. I don't expect you to fix it, Emma. Just stay patient." Emma nodded, her hands folded over a mug of warm tea. "I'll try. I really will." She realized in that moment that patience was going to be her most valuable tool, far more important than any knife or pan dot despite the challenges. She also saw the small victories, like the time Lily finally tried a new vegetable she had cooked, or when David remarked on a perfectly balanced sauce. These moments reminded her why she had taken this job in the first place. It wasn't just about cooking. It was about being part of a family, even if in a delicate, cautious way. And beneath the tension, Emma could feel something growing, a quiet, fragile trust. It was there in Lily's lingering glances, in the way David occasionally left a dish untouched so she could perfect it, in the subtle moments when laughter returned to the kitchen after a stormy day. These small threads were weaving a bond that Emma couldn't yet name, but she could feel it forming, strong enough to withstand the challenges, but only if she remained patient, gentle, and attentive to the heartbeats of the family she was slowly becoming a part of. The days passed in a rhythm of measured patience, quiet victories, and small tentative joys. Emma had grown used to the delicate dance of balancing her role as both cook and gentle companion to Lily. She had learned when to speak, when to step back, and when a simple smile or a shared laugh was enough. But nothing could have prepared her for the moment that would forever change the atmosphere of the household. It happened one late afternoon. Emma had been teaching Lily how to make homemade pasta from scratch, a task requiring focus, patience, and a delicate touch. The kitchen was filled with the warm aroma of flour and olive oil, soft sunlight streaming through the windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. Lily's small hands were covered in flour, her brow furrowed in concentration as she rolled out a sheet of dough, careful with the rolling pin. "Lily," Emma said gently, guiding her daughter's hands for a moment, "we don't want it too thin or it will tear." Lily looked up at her with wide eyes, flour smudged across her cheeks. "I know," she said softly. There was a pause, and then, almost as if the words had been weighing on her all along, she said, "Emma, can I tell you something?" Emma froze, her heart skipping a beat. "Of course," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I picked you to be my mommy." The words hung in the air, fragile and startling. Emma's hand froze on the rolling pin, and she blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. She looked down at Lily, expecting to see a hint of mischief or uncertainty, but instead saw pure honesty, unfiltered and innocent. The child's small hands trembled slightly, and her eyes were wide with a mixture of hope and vulnerability. Emma felt a rush of emotion she hadn't anticipated: shock, tenderness, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. She knelt down to Lily's level, brushing the flour-streaked hair from the girl's forehead. "Lily, that's very sweet," she said, struggling to find the right words. I'm so honored that you feel that way." Lily looked down at the dough, fidgeting with her fingers. I don't have a mommy like other kids do," she whispered. "And I like you. You're nice to me, and you make me happy." Emma's chest tightened. She had always dreamed of creating a warm, loving home through her cooking, but this was entirely different. A child had entrusted her with a piece of her heart, and the weight of that trust settled deep in Emma's soul. I don't know if I can be your mommy the way you imagine," Emma said gently, choosing her words carefully. "But I promise I'll always be here for you. I'll always care about you, and I'll always make sure you're safe and happy." Lily's lips curved into a small, tentative smile, a flicker of relief and joy crossing her face. "Really?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Really," Emma replied, reaching out to hold Lily's flour-dusted hands. "I'm here, and I want to be someone you can count on." The air between them shifted in that moment. It was no longer just teacher and student, cook and child. It was something deeper, more intimate, and infinitely more fragile. Emma realized that this bond, once forged through shared meals and kitchen laughter, had now become something unspoken but profound, a connection of trust, care, and affection that neither of them could fully articulate yet both felt unmistakably. Later that evening, as Emma cleaned up the kitchen, she couldn't stop thinking about Lily's words. They echoed in her mind. "I picked you to be my mommy." Simple, yet monumental. The declaration was a turning point, a moment that redefined Emma's place in the household. She had come to cook for a family, but now she was intertwined with its heart, its hope, and its future in ways she had never anticipated. And somewhere in that quiet kitchen, filled with the lingering scent of pasta and flour, Emma knew that everything was about to change, not just for Lily, not just for David, but for her, too. That night, after tucking Lily into bed and ensuring her favorite nightlight cast a soft glow across the room, Emma returned to the quiet of the kitchen. The house was still, save for the occasional creak of floorboards and the distant hum of the refrigerator. She poured herself a cup of tea, wrapping her hands around the warm mug, and tried to process what had just happened. "I picked you to be my mommy." The words echoed in her mind, repeating with a clarity that made her heart both swell and ache. Emma had always been careful to maintain boundaries, to keep her life professional, to guard herself against attachments that might complicate her work or her emotions. And yet, here was Lily, innocent, trusting, and so profoundly sincere, placing a piece of her heart in Emma's hands. Emma thought about her own life, a patchwork of culinary passion, small successes, and lingering uncertainties. She had never imagined herself in a traditional family role. Relationships had been transient, fleeting, or complicated. Her dreams were often wrapped in flavors, aromas, and menus, not lullabies or bedtime stories. Yet the truth was undeniable. This child had chosen her. And in that choice, Emma found herself facing a question she had never expected. Could I be more than just a cook? Could I be a part of their family? The thought made her stomach flutter. She loved cooking, it was the core of her identity, but love in the household wasn't as simple as preparing meals. It was patience, empathy, understanding, and emotional endurance. It was accepting Lily's moods, her doubts, and her pain, especially the lingering wounds left by her parents' divorce. It was facing David's careful, sometimes distant scrutiny, and navigating a world Emma had only ever observed from the edges. Emma sipped her tea, letting the warmth seep into her hands. She thought about Lily's tiny flour-covered fingers, the way the girl had looked up at her with unguarded trust. She remembered the small moments of laughter, the shared baking lessons, and the cautious smiles that Lily had offered when Emma hadn't forced them. And she realized something vital. These moments weren't just about the child, they were about Emma too. They were challenging her, shaping her, and inviting her to grow in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her mind wandered to David. He was patient, fair, and considerate, yet there was an unspoken tension between him and Emma. She had noticed the subtle glances, the quiet acknowledgement of her presence in the household, and the faint smiles when Lily praised her meals. But a relationship with David wasn't simple. It carried history, responsibility, and the unspoken awareness that any misstep could affect Lily's fragile sense of security. Emma set down the mug and leaned back in her chair, staring at the clean countertops. She was at a crossroads. She could maintain the professional distance she had initially promised herself, focusing solely on cooking and leaving her emotions carefully compartmentalized. Or she could allow herself to step further into this household, embracing the bond with Lily and possibly with David, fully aware that doing so would change her life irrevocably. She thought about the small victories. The moment Lily had tried a new vegetable without hesitation, the proud sparkle in her eyes when a pancake flipped perfectly, and the laughter that had begun to echo through the kitchen in a way that felt almost like music. These moments weren't just fleeting joys. They were a call, a gentle urging to invest herself emotionally, to accept that this little girl had chosen her and that she might, in turn, choose to accept Lily's trust and affection. After a long pause, Emma exhaled slowly. Her decision wasn't instantaneous, and she knew the road ahead would be complicated and filled with challenges. But she also knew that some opportunities, some connections, were too precious to ignore. She whispered quietly to herself, almost as if making a vow, "I'll try. I'll be here for her, and I'll do my best to be someone she can count on." The resolve settled over her like a comforting cloak. Emma realized that this wasn't just a professional decision anymore. It was personal, emotional, and profoundly transformative. She didn't yet know the full depth of what it meant to be part of this small, fragile family, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to step into the unknown. That night, as the house slipped into silence and the moon cast soft shadows across the kitchen floor, Emma understood something essential. Sometimes, the most unexpected opportunities, like a child choosing you to be their mommy, were the ones that could change your life forever. And she was ready to embrace it, one careful, loving step at a time. The following weeks marked a delicate but profound shift in the Wentworth household. Emma had made her decision to embrace the bond with Lily and to navigate her growing connection with David with patience and care. And in response, the household seemed to breathe a little easier, as if the invisible tension had begun to lift. It started in small, everyday ways. Lily would greet Emma with a bright smile in the mornings, asking to help with breakfast or offering suggestions for what to cook. Emma allowed the girl to take the lead sometimes, letting her pour ingredients or stir sauces, even when it meant a messy kitchen. David, observing from the doorway or quietly working on his laptop in the living room, would sometimes chuckle at the flour-dusted scene before him, a rare look of ease crossing his face. Evenings became a time of shared routine. Emma would prepare dinner while Lily recounted her day, her words tumbling out in a mix of excitement and curiosity. Occasionally, David would join them, sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, engaging in casual conversation. The atmosphere, once formal and distant, grew warmer, more natural. Emma noticed that David began to trust her judgment not just in cooking, but in small decisions regarding the household and Lily's routines. One afternoon, Emma suggested they all bake a cake together for no particular reason other than enjoyment. Lily clapped her hands with excitement, while David, initially hesitant, eventually joined in, carefully measuring ingredients under Emma's guidance. The kitchen was filled with laughter, teasing, and a sense of camaraderie that had been missing for so long. Emma realized that these moments were shaping a new type of family, one not defined by blood, but by care, trust, and shared experiences. There were still challenges, of course. Lily's moods fluctuated, especially when reminders of her mother surfaced, and David had his moments of quiet stress from work that sometimes made him withdrawn. Emma learned to read the subtle cues, the sigh before a word, the way Lily would fidget with her fingers, or the slight tension in David's shoulders. She found ways to support them without overstepping, leaving small gestures of kindness, like freshly baked bread or a note of encouragement, to remind them she was present and invested. Through it all, the bond between Emma and Lily deepened. The little girl's declaration from weeks before, "I picked you to be my mommy," was no longer a single moment frozen in memory. It had become a living, breathing part of their daily life. Lily sought Emma's guidance, comfort, and approval, and Emma, in turn, responded with care, patience, and a quiet joy she hadn't anticipated. They had developed a rhythm of trust, laughter, and mutual respect, one that didn't feel forced but natural, like the easy flow of a well-practiced recipe. David noticed the transformation as well. One evening, he paused in the doorway while Emma and Lily were laughing over a kitchen mishap. "I didn't realize it before," he said softly, almost to himself, "but you've become an important part of our lives." Emma looked up. surprised but touched. I feel the same," she admitted. "I came here to cook, but this feels bigger than that. It's about you and Lily and being part of your lives in a meaningful way." David nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "It is, and I trust you." That means more than I can say. From that evening onward, the household shifted again, this time in a more permanent, comforting way. The kitchen was no longer just a place of work. It had become a place of connection. Meals were not just about nourishment, but about shared experiences, laughter, and comfort. Emma, Lily, and David found themselves falling into a routine that resembled a family. Bedtime stories, shared jokes, quiet support during stressful moments, and the small but significant gestures that wove their lives together. Emma realized that love, she had learned, didn't always come with grand declarations or instant recognition. Sometimes it arrived in the form of flour on little fingers, a shy smile across the kitchen table, and the quiet understanding that she was needed, trusted, and cherished. And in that understanding, she found her place not just as a cook, but as an integral part of a family she had never imagined she would belong to. By the time autumn arrived, the Wentworth household had transformed in ways Emma had never expected. What had started as a job, a purely professional endeavor of cooking meals, had grown into something far richer, far more profound. The kitchen was no longer just a workspace. It was a place of laughter, conversation, and shared experiences. Every meal, every shared recipe, every tiny moment had stitched the three of them closer together. Lily, once cautious and reserved, now greeted Emma each morning with a bright smile and a hug that lingered just a little longer than before. She sought Emma's guidance in small ways, helping with cooking, sharing stories from school, or asking for advice about friendships. Emma, in turn, responded with patience, encouragement, and a warmth that was increasingly difficult to separate from the affection she felt for the little girl. David's presence had also shifted. No longer just a distant figure preoccupied with work, he had begun to relax into the household rhythm. He appreciated Emma's efforts not only in the kitchen but in her careful, gentle nurturing of Lily. He trusted her judgment, relied on her instincts, and often found himself silently admiring the way she balanced authority, kindness, and understanding. One evening, the three of them found themselves gathered around the kitchen island, preparing a meal together. Lily had chosen the menu, a mix of favorite dishes, and was bustling with excitement, barking small instructions at her father and Emma with a grin that lit up the room. The atmosphere was lighthearted and filled with laughter, a stark contrast to the quiet tension that had marked Emma's first days. At one point, Lily paused, looking up at Emma with earnest eyes. "I love it when we cook together," she said softly. "I love that you're here, and that you care about me." Emma's chest tightened and she crouched to Lily's level. "I love cooking with you too, Lily," she said gently. "And I promise I'll always be here for you." David, standing behind them, reached out and rested a hand on Emma's shoulder. "You've become more than we could have imagined," he said, his voice quiet but full of meaning. "You're part of our family now." Emma felt a wave of emotion sweep over her. She had known from the beginning that this job would be challenging, but she hadn't anticipated the depth of connection she would feel or the profound responsibility and privilege of being someone Lily could depend on. She realized that love, trust, and family didn't always come in conventional forms. Sometimes they arrived quietly, through shared meals, laughter, and small acts of care. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, Emma lingered by the door for a moment, watching the child drift into sleep. She whispered softly, "You've chosen me, and I've chosen you too. Lily, we'll take this journey together." In the kitchen, David poured himself a cup of tea, glancing at Emma with a gentle smile. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything. For her and for being here." Emma returned the smile, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment she had never known before. She had arrived in the household as a cook, a professional hired to fill a role. But over time, she had become so much more a trusted companion, a guide, a confidant, and in a way, a mother. And in that quiet, warm home, filled with the scent of home-cooked meals and the sounds of contentment, the three of them sat together, a family not defined by blood or circumstance, but by choice, love, and trust. Emma understood, in a deep and undeniable way, that this was where she belonged. For the first time in a long while, she felt fully, beautifully at home.